Well, hello there. Thank you for joining me today. We are going to start a prophecy series of end-time Bible prophecies. We're going to be studying from Daniel to Revelations, about 22,500 years of history and Bible prophecy that we are going to be going through. And so it's very exciting, and I'm thankful that you have joined me. So when it comes to understanding Bible prophecy, it's important that we lay the foundation. And to know that there are predominantly three views of prophetic interpretation: historicism, futurism, and preterism. And these views end in different directions. They go in different directions. They come to different conclusions. So the Bible student cannot believe both preterism and futurism because they're totally opposite from each other. They're contrary to each other. And so we have to pick one. Which one is right? So two of these views of prophetic interpretation come from a particular volatile and exciting time in history, and that's the Protestant Reformation from between the 15 and 1600s. And during this time, priests, monks, clergymen of the Catholic Church saw some corruption within the church that they wanted to reform. And so we have the word Protestant, which means to protest, and then we have the word Reformation. And so that's where we get the words Protestant Reformation. Now, they saw certain things within the Catholic Church that they didn't like, and so they rose up to protest them. Some of them were the buying and selling of indulgences and the things that went with that. There was the buying and selling of ecclesiastical privileges and clerical offices and so forth. And so they asked for and they called for a reformation within the church. It was never their goal or desire to separate from the Catholic Church, but to just reform it from the inside. But after a while, they realized that the Catholic Church, the hierarchy within the church, was not willing to be reformed. And so these reformers were met with severe persecution. Many of them were excommunicated, tortured, and some of them were even killed. And for hundreds of years, the corruption within the church has suppressed Bible truths and religious liberty. The Bible was actually written in a Latin language. Now, if a church had a Bible, it was chained to the pulpit and it was written in Latin, and the common people couldn't understand that. So they relied upon the priest to interpret the scriptures for them. But then there came a time like John Wycliffe and Martin Luther and a few others began to translate the Bible into the common tongue. And then they used the newly invented printing press to print the Bible and then distribute it widely among the people. And for the first time in over 1,000 years, people were able to have a Bible and to study it for themselves. And also at this time, many biblical truths were rediscovered. A lot of people left the Catholic Church and they started their own churches based on the things that they were learning. And so that's where we get a lot of the Protestant denominations today. The Baptists from the Calvinists, and we have the Lutheran Church and the Presbyterian churches and so forth. There's more, but I can't remember them all right now. Anyway, so that's where a lot of the modern day churches came from, but they came from this particular time in history when they started rediscovering a lot of biblical truths that had been lost. Now let's start looking at the methods of prophetic interpretation, and the first one I want to look at is historicism. Now, what is historicism? Historicism is a method of prophetic interpretation where the prophecy starts in the time of the vision, in the time of the prophet who was given the vision, and then it goes down through history and it's fulfilled at certain times in history all the way to the very end. So the prophecy starts in the time of the prophet, and it extends all the way to the time of the end, the end of Revelations, all the way to the end. And that's historicism, and it's actually one of the oldest methods of prophetic interpretation. We have evidence that Bible scholars and Bible students were using historicism in the 2nd century AD all the way up to the current day. And a lot of prominent people in history like Newton and Wycliffe and Knox, they all used the historicist method of interpretation. Now, it's very interesting to note that during the Reformation, the historicist method of prophetic interpretation became the reformers' method. They used the historicist method from the very beginning, and then from there forward another 500 years it became the standard of prophetic interpretation. Now, as the Bible was being distributed among the people and people were studying it, they began to study the prophecies of Daniel and Revelations, and they all came to a united discovery that their Bible revealed an antichrist power. And they came to the consensus that the antichrist system was the Catholic Church, and that the Pope was the Antichrist. And this was very damaging, as you can believe, to the Roman Catholic Church. What happened was the Catholic Church started a counter-reformation, starting with the Council of Trent. This counter-reformation was started by the Jesuits order, or the Society of Jesus, as it is also called, and two Jesuit priests came up with the other methods of prophetic interpretation at this time, and that's preterism and futurism. So now we're going to look at those two methods of prophetic interpretation. Spanish Jesuit Luis de Alcazar is accredited for developing this preterist method of prophetic interpretation in an attempt to remove the Catholic Church from consideration as the Antichrist power. And preterism teaches that all prophecy of Daniel's and Revelation must have been fulfilled already during the period between its origin, the writings of Daniel, and all the way up to the 70 AD, where the destruction of Jerusalem occurred. And in fact, Alcazar believes that Matthew 24 was completely fulfilled during the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. You might have also heard of the idea that Nero is the Antichrist. Well, Alcazar came up with that idea, and it all has to do with putting everything back and saying everything was fulfilled way back then. It has nothing to do with the time period of the Catholic Church or anything beyond. In fact, when it comes to preterism, there's no such thing as end time prophecies as we can apply to us today. Everything has already been fulfilled during the first 6 centuries of Christianity, before the Roman Catholic Church rose to power in 530 AD. And so that's basically what preterism teaches. Now we're going to look a moment at futurism. The futurist prophetic interpretation was developed by Jesuit Ribeira Francisco, and today he's known as the founder of the futurist system of belief. And he also wrote a lengthy commentary, just like Alcazar did. And his desire was to counter the Protestant interpretations of the Catholic Church being the Antichrist power. And so what he does is he takes all of Revelations and a little bit of Daniel, and he shoves everything way into the future, just prior to the second coming of Jesus. Now, this would be his prophecies, we can say, would apply to us, because they're shoved forward into our time frame, or even beyond our time frame. And he can do this because he created what's known as a 2,000-year gap. In fact, futurism is known for its 2,000-year gap, and all of its prophecies hinge on this 2,000-year gap. And so when we look at the interpretations of futurism, we can see also that he came up with what is called the rapture. You may be very familiar with this. Futurism is one of the most popular methods of prophetic interpretation today. It's been popularized by books and by movies, and so it's probably something that you've heard of. Perhaps you yourself might believe in it and not know exactly where it came from. Well, this is where it came from. It's very interesting. So there's in futurism, there's a rapture that happens when all the true Christians are taken to heaven just prior to the second coming of Jesus. Also prior to the second coming of Jesus is what is called a 7-year tribulation. And then, there's differing views when it comes to the rapture. That's sometimes some people believe that the rapture happens before the 7-year tribulation. Some say it happens during the middle of it, and some say it happens towards the end, and some say, well, it happens throughout. But so there's differing views as far as when the rapture takes place. Now, as we can see, since now we know what futurism, preterism, and historicism teach, we can see that all three of these prophetic interpretations arrive in completely opposite conclusions. And so the question now is, which one is correct? And it would not be fair for me to assert my point of view or opinion on the matter without sound study of the Bible's own prophecies, because it's my belief that the Bible itself clearly reveals which method of prophetic interpretation that it uses. And we'll see as we start getting into Daniel specifically, and then, because that's where we're going to start, and then we're going to go into Revelations. But you will see as we get into Daniel and Revelations that the Bible actually has its own method of prophetic interpretations. Which one is it? Historicism, preterism, or futurism? And the Bible will reveal this. It's actually going to be very clear. And I want the Bible to give you the answer, not me. Throughout these entire studies, we're going to allow the Bible to interpret itself. And that's how we can stay away from any private interpretation. Now, the purpose for learning about the three methods of prophetic interpretation is just to give us an understanding of why we might believe what we believe, where our beliefs might have come from when it comes to end-time prophecies. Many of us may already have preformed ideas and beliefs about prophecies from various sources of theology, things we read or people that we listened to or heard, studies that we've gone through or so forth. So as we study, we'll begin to see that the Bible actually establishes its own set of interpretive rules, patterns, and methods of prophetic interpretation to help us understand its truths and to unlock its mysteries. And so we want to look to the Bible and just focus on what it teaches and how it teaches. It also it's just so exciting to me that it gives us an understanding of how to study itself, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So as Bible students, we want to learn simply what the Bible teaches. We want to devote ourselves to its truth and to its interpretations, regardless of what we might have previously been told or thought or believed. If the Bible is not our standard of truth, then we don't have anything to stand upon that is solid. We have nothing to confidently put our trust in, and we have no decisive clarity about anything. But there's great comfort in knowing that God has designed a book to help us to understand where we came from, who we are, who God is, and what He was doing in our life, what He wants to do in our life, and how He's orchestrating or sovereign over the things that are happening in our life today and in the world today. So as we continue these studies, may Psalms 119:69 be our prayer. Let my cry come near before Thee, O Lord. Give me understanding according to Thy word. Well, that concludes the first study of this series, and I hope it was interesting to you, and I look forward to meeting you next time in our next study on end-time Bible prophecies. Thank you.